What's up, YouTube? It's the Action Figure Grader coming back to you with another video. Before I begin, let me say thank you to my Patreon supporters. You guys allow me to make more and better videos. If you're interested in becoming a Patreon supporter, patreon.com/actionfiguregrader. I got lots of great feedback from the economics video that I did about a week ago. And I feel like the subscriber comments as part of that are worthy of putting together a video. And let me just say this. If you look at Boss Bounty or Only One Kenobi or all these other really big names within the YouTube collecting community, they don't have nearly the intelligent comments that I get. You guys are really good. You guys are really good about putting together some awesome comments. And of course, I'm kidding. I love those guys. But I wanted to get some feedback from you guys regarding this recession that seems to be already here. And you guys came through with some really good comments that I wanted to share on the channel. And let's go ahead and dig right in. DVX says, it will be September when you really see it start. People right now do not have to pay back student loans. That starts again in September. And with inflation hitting, people will not be able to spend extra money. This is a great comment. And I want to emphasize that in the video, I talked about, hey, this is the collecting prices peak, and we're going to start seeing it drop. And I agree with him that it's not. It takes a little while for things to trickle down, right? The Fed recently raised interest rates by 0.75 of a point. That's the first time in 28 years that they've gone up 0.75 of a point. And the Fed also indicated that there's a possibility that next month they're going to do it again, another 0.75 point increase. So what happens? After they raise rates, everything becomes more expensive. Student loans, if they're on an adjustable rate, car loans, credit cards, all of that stuff then adjusts based on the federal funds rate. And things get more expensive, obviously, with inflation, but it's really about reeling back in consumer spending. And when you have more expensive loans that you've got to pay, whether it's credit cards or student loans, whatever, it's going to affect collecting eventually. And it just takes a little bit of time for that to trickle down. So when I say I call the peak, I mean that right around now is going to be the absolute price peak. And as I said in the video, you might have a few more months, but it's not going to be long. It's not going to be long. I really do expect prices for all collectibles to decrease. And while the comic book market is pretty volatile, prices across the board really are down. And that's the first shoe to drop. It's a much larger collecting community for comic books, in my opinion, than for action figures. And I think that there's going to be some people that are not affected by the economy at all, recession proof, so to speak, and rare collectibles, which we're going to talk about here in a little while, may not be as much affected. But the common items, the AFA 80 sand people, those are going to start dropping, I think, because that buyer pool is more likely to be affected, in my opinion, by prices overall and by the higher cost of living versus like a prototype rocket firing Boba Fett. That's $200,000 or $200,000 plus, at least based on the last Hakes auction. Those kind of people who are buying $200,000 plastic dolls are probably not nearly as affected by the recession. So we'll see. I'm going to summarize this, but this is a great comment by Robert Westwood. He says, my purchase habits have increased for past items as the prices have already just started to come down. So that's what Robert's saying. He said, if I recall correctly, you're a real estate agent, so I'm curious to know if home listings in your area have dramatically increased over the past few weeks as they have in Nevada. I'm looking at available listings right now, and compared to 6 months ago, one couldn't see as many listings as I saw today within a whole month. And this is a valid comment because once the Fed raised rates, interest rates for 30-year mortgages, they jumped up quickly. They've gone from 3.3% or thereabouts just about a month and a half ago to now they're over 6%. And I called it in the video. I said it's got, in the video, it was about 5.35%. And I said they're going to be at 6% soon. Well, by the time the video even released a few days later, they were already above 6%. And now they're at 6.32%. I expect them to go even further. And so what am I seeing locally? I'm in real estate. That's my real life job. I wish YouTube was my real job, but it's not. This is a hobby for me. But my real life job is in real estate. And yes, it was almost overnight. It took about 2 weeks, and the market has softened dramatically for houses, for home sales. Inventory is at their highest levels in over a year. mortgage applications are down 50% in the last 12 months. So if you look at mortgage applications today versus mortgage applications just 12 months ago, it's been cut in half, and it's going to have an effect on prices. It's all supply and demand. People are hunkering down. They're not going to be splurging on that super fancy house and upgrading their houses, things like that. People are happy with their job situation, and they don't want to risk, maybe moving from their current job, which is not exactly perfect, to get another job and relocate. So that's going to affect housing prices indirectly. So all of that stuff is true, and I think that in general, housing prices are going to come down. Now, he also says it could be finally a good time to take advantage of my VA loan opportunity. So yes, housing prices are down, but guess what? Your mortgage is going to be more expensive. I saw an article recently where the monthly payment on, I don't remember the exact cost of the house, but they looked at apples to apples monthly payment when it was at roughly 3% mortgage rate versus 6.35% interest rate, and your monthly payment went from about $1,350 to almost $1,900. That is a huge difference. We're talking $600 or so in change in monthly payment. So it's going to affect everything else in terms of what consumers spend their money on. And as I talked about in the last video, 70% of the US economy is just people buying crap. That's all it is. Whether you're buying groceries or you're buying vintage collection pre-orders that you're not going to see for 13 months, people are spending money. And that's what 70% of our economy is. So people are going to pull back on discretionary items. LBFT Man, he says, well, this video encouraged me to thin out my collection ASAP. And I think that if you're a collector right now and you have a large collection and you were thinking about selling, to me, this is a good time to do it. This is a really good time to do it. I know me personally, I sold off probably about 30 graded items, mostly modern vintage collections, a few graded bootlegs, things like that. Nice items. I wish I didn't have to sell them, but I wanted to have a little powder keg in the event that we do see collecting prices drop over the next 2 to 3 to 6 months. I want to have a nice little, pile of dough that is discretionary only, and I want to pick up a grail, whatever it is. I haven't decided what it is yet, but I wanted to thin out the collection. I think now's a good time if you're a collector and you want to thin out. Now's a good time, and now's probably also a good time for me to mention that if you have vintage Star Wars figures, vintage Kenner Star Wars figures, and you need help selling those, I don't charge anything for it, but I do connect sellers with buyers. So you can send me an email to actionfiguregrader@gmail.com. I'll put you in touch with several folks that I know that are buying stuff right now, and they give you very fair prices, and it allows you and the buyer to avoid eBay fees, eBay tax reporting, things like that. So feel free to reach out to me if you have vintage Kenner items, vintage Kenner Star Wars items, not modern stuff. I don't have any buyers for that stuff, but I'm happy to help in any way, and I don't get anything for it. I just try to help folks out. Next up, Bravo DannyOne says, I'm definitely buying less now than even 1 month ago, and I'm in Norway, who are looking towards higher interest rates too. Last 2 months, I bought 2 figures. 2 figures in 2 months. That's a pretty good job of no buy. I've been laughing with Chris W, who runs Rogue 5 Toys on Facebook. He says, hey, I got this item. Do you want it? I'm like, no buy June July. I try to go no buy July every year. This year I did no buy June July. I didn't buy hardly anything. I think I bought 2 CGC books that were not expensive, by the way. 2 CGC graded 9.8s. And it's June 16th right now. So I made it halfway through the month, but I've bought 2 books. And I'm trying to just not buy too much right now because I think it's kind of a precarious time. And I also think personally that prices are going to be coming down, and they're going to continue to come down. So why not wait for a little bit? Be patient. So that's what he said. And he says, of course, the economy, but also the fact that unrealistic prices on vintage Star Wars, especially on eBay. This has made me spend more time in the groups on Facebook for vintage action figures with much more sensible prices. And I encourage you guys to check out Rogue 5 Toys. That's where I buy the bulk of my vintage Kenner stuff. And Chris W runs a great group over there, and they do a good job. And prices are fair. They're always kind of in line with market, and they always tend to sell pretty quickly. So you got to claim it quick. But I would encourage you guys to shop more on Facebook right now than eBay, unless it's at auction, of course. But that's the way to go, I think, for collecting vintage Kenner stuff right now. And I think we'll see even better prices in the coming months. WildBill says eBay is definitely not popping lately. Well, I think that's a good point. I think for common items, especially, eBay prices are down a little bit. It's not a lot. It's, you know, the rare items and the super high grade items are still commanding massive premiums. And it goes back to what I talked about at the beginning of the video. There are some people that are just recession proof. Either they're sitting on $100 million and they don't care, or they have jobs where their income is not affected by the recession. Now, their 401ks and retirement accounts can be affected by it, and certainly everyone's retirement accounts, if you are invested in stocks, if you have some aggressive kind of portfolio allocation, your stock accounts are down. And I know mine is. But whether that affects the ultra wealthy or not, to where they pull back on discretionary spending, who knows? But I do think that for common items on eBay, whether they're loose or loose ungraded or graded or mint in seal box, whatever it is, if they're common and they're easy to find, I expect those prices to come down. Because you have to remember, as I've talked about, in Kenner's heyday, they were producing anywhere, depending on the estimates, from 9 to 15 or 16 million figures every year during their heyday. So there's a lot of stuff out there. The higher the grade, the more expensive it's going to be, obviously. But for the common stuff, I do think that, you know, if you're kind of just a loose collector and you don't care about grading, you don't care about condition, you're about to get some pretty good deals, because there's going to be a lot of it out there as collectors who are not financially savvy, or who maybe don't have their nest eggs in place. And as the recession hits and they're pulling out of savings to pay for everyday living expenses, the next shoe to drop is going to be their small Star Wars collections. And you're going to see more and more people listing it on eBay. And I see that now. I already see it today. I mean, I saw a guy that listed like 15 very common loose graded figures, and he's just thinning out his collection. And he even said in the description, I need some money. So we're going to see a lot more of that, I think. Dog46 Golf, shout out to Matthew C., friend of the channel. Dig the video, John. Thanks for the hard work and research. I know that I've slowed a little buying wise, but I'm less concerned about the overall impact on the vintage collection, as I just think there's a big difference between buying a $100 Trooper versus a $4,000 Han Solo. So fingers crossed that TVC is okay, and I think it should be. And I agree. I don't know if you're necessarily going to see massive drops in the vintage collection because of the recession, because let's face it, the vast majority of the vintage collection is very affordable, and that's why it's so heavily collected and why it's very popular. Especially new releases. I mean, new releases, 15, 20 bucks get you an awesome mint on card, new release vintage collection figure. Now, some of the early ones that have not seen the reissue announcements or pipeline news, like Star Killer, you know, the VC-20 Yoda, that's kind of a holy grail within the vintage collection that has hit $2,000 plus recently. Do I think those will pull back? I do. I really do. I think those will pull back. I think things like Jar Jar Binks in Carbonite, and like the Mouse Droid and Salacious Crumb, some of those figures may pull back, and we'll see. Maybe they won't. There's a couple of those at auction right now on eBay, so we'll see what those final sales prices are in the next vintage collection market update, I'm sure, next week. But yes, I agree that in general the vintage collection is a little more insulated because they're less expensive. And but if you're talking about vintage Kenner stuff, especially high grade and especially tough to find card backs or rare foreign stuff or pre-production vintage Kenner, I don't know if we'll necessarily see a quick pullback if the recession is long. I mean, you know, it goes back to the recession. This recession that we're getting ready to go into, is it going to be a 6-month recession? Or is it going to be like the Great Recession in 08, 09, where it lasted for 2 years? I don't know the answer, but I tend to think that it's going to be a little bit faster recession. It's not going to be the massive recession that we saw in 08 or 09, because number one, banks are better capitalized. And number two, I think people learned their lesson in the 07, 08 recession, and they learned their lesson during lockdowns that I need to have my ducks in a row. And so a higher percentage maybe of people are maybe a little more prepared for this recession, because the writing was on the wall, and this was a little bit easier to predict also. The lockdown economy effects were more sudden. The 08 recession maybe was a little different because we didn't really know what banks' balance sheets were and how exposed they were to mortgage-backed securities. This one's a little different. This one, the writing was on the wall, and it was kind of creeping that way towards a recession. And so I think hopefully more people are prepared, but we'll see. Deepwater says, I have no doubt that it's already here. He's talking about the recession, and it's already affecting Star Wars collectible space. I've been keeping an Excel database, God bless you, there's no way I'm doing that, of almost every AFA, CAS, or UKG loose graded figure to sell on eBay over the last 3 months or so. Far and away, the highest volume figure has been Boba Fett. Big surprise there, given the prices for Boba Fett. I don't break out sales by variant or COO, only by grade. And he's saying of the first 5 closed sales during this time frame, not a single one closed below $400. Of the last 5 closed sales, not a single one closed above $300. So we've already seen in his, based on his data, and again, it's not apples to apples because we don't know the COO, the exact grade, but if you're talking about averages anyway, he's already seen a pullback of 25% on figures. So things are slowing down, and I agree with that. And that's a great comment by Deepwater. Thank you for sharing that. I do think we're seeing a slowdown in common items, and I'm sorry, but Boba Fett, even in high grade, is a common item. There's a lot of them out there, and they were produced in big numbers. Texas Sci-Fi says, my collecting has changed because I'm out of space. And this is something we also talked about in the collecting fatigue video. And also, there's a lack of availability of things I actually want to buy. I'm in that space too. I picked up a lot of mint on cards over the last few months, and there's nothing I really, really need to have right now. And so as a consequence, I'm waiting. I'm waiting for something to come up that I really want. I thought about putting money into real goods as a hedge, which I agree with. Hard assets, I think, are the way to go during a high inflation environment. And how long this high inflation environment lasts, I think, depends on the recession and how quickly it hits. And it also depends on how quickly the Fed raises the federal funds rate. So he says, I think rarity is the key to any value of any collectible, and that's common sense, but he's right. That's going to hold. If you have rare items, if you have a double telescoping saber, Darth Vader, that's a pretty rare item, and especially in high grade, that's going to hold its value, and it's going to weather the storm, so to speak. It may not be quite as high, but it'll still weather the storm. There's almost like a price floor when you have rarity. If it's a 1 of 20 or a 1 of 5. My Toxic Boss is probably like about a 1 of 20 that's out there. My gut says that when this recession is in full swing, there's still going to be some deep-pocketed collector out there that's willing to pay what I paid for it. But my AFA 85, Tusken Raider, again. I don't know why I'm picking on the Tusken Raider so much. But that's a pretty common item, and that's probably going to be hit a little bit more percentage-wise. So we'll see. Next up, Ransom Stoddard says, I would love to say I am cutting back my collecting, but no, I am buying more than ever. Also, 3 new vintage toy stores have opened in the Northeast Philly area. I wish prices were dropping, but I haven't seen it. Well, everyone's got a different opinion. It all depends on what you're looking for and what you're tracking. And I'm glad that you're still buying and that you're not affected by it. But I think more and more collectors are going to be affected by this recession. And it comes down to what their socioeconomic class is. If you're at if you're towards the lower end of the median income level, and the job situation changes. Right now in the U.S., we have a really good job situation. The unemployment rate is low, and but growth is slowing, and so we're getting ready to enter maybe some stagflation. Who knows? But whether that affects the common collector, I think it will. If it affects the collector who collects very rare, very high-end stuff that maybe has deeper pockets and can weather the storm, so to speak, they probably won't see as much of a drop, because it all comes down to what you're looking at too. If you're only looking at Vinyl Cape Jawas like he has in his profile photo, maybe those aren't quite as affected by the recession as a normal Jawa. So, but I think it's a great comment, and thank you for sharing. Jumping General says, my health is wealth. Value and take care of your personal health through these difficult times. If I don't have this, I lose it all. Well said there. And finally, fellow YouTuber Jules Bert. If you're not a member of Jules Bert or subscriber of Jules Bert's channel, he's got some fantastic collections that he likes to go through. I really enjoy his stuff. He says, I've been looking forward to seeing this one, John. Absolutely fascinating, and I agree. Even a blind mouse could see a recession is coming. It's bound to have a knock on affecting our precious collectibles. If you live by the mantra of just collecting what you love, then who cares if prices drop by a bit? If you bought for investment, prepare for a rough few times ahead. And I agree with that. I think that this recession, to a certain extent, hopefully weeds out the flippers, weeds out some of those people that are buying and selling, and gets rid of some of those folks that maybe shouldn't be doing it, or maybe causing some of the bubble type conditions that we're seeing for certain Star Wars collectibles. But if you're in it for the long haul like I am, and you don't necessarily need to sell your collection like I don't, then you just prepare for lower prices. And if you're a buyer, if you're still buying stuff, which I am on a limited basis, then I'm hoping that prices do drop a little bit, quite honestly, because I'd like to pick up some other items and not spend quite so much that I have been over the last few years. That's all I really had for this video. If you're new to the channel, welcome. Please consider subscribing. To all my existing subscribers, you guys, I really appreciate you. Please comment below with any questions to keep the gravy train rolling. Thanks again, and I'll be back soon.